Hello, my name is Mark McGill, and today I'm here to talk about Tortilla Flat, Chapter 9. A brief overview of the chapter: there's a new character introduced named Sweets, and she is a house worker for some of the people in the Tortilla Flat. And one day, Sweets gets Danny's attention as he's walking by, and Danny walks into her house for a glass of wine as they're just old friends catching up. In this moment, it is described that Danny had a feeling of lust take over him. And after the glass of wine, he leaves, but promised her that he would be back later that night. Danny goes out to search for a few gifts, and he comes back with wine and a vacuum, a big and shiny vacuum. Sweets instantly climbs to the top of the social scale, as she is the only woman with a vacuum in all of the Tortilla Flat. However, Sweets does not have electricity, and she's expecting Danny to pay for electricity to be wired to her house. Pylon warns Danny about the demanding needs by Sweets, and so Danny allows Pylon to go steal the vacuum so that Danny wouldn't worry anymore. Pylon trades it for 2 gallons of wine from Mrs. Torelli, 1 gallon for them, and the other one he was planning to give to Danny, who he could give to Sweets, so that Sweets could forget about the vacuum. Then Pylon returns, and the friends start drinking the wine. And as they take down the first gallon, Danny decides they should just drink the second gallon, and that Sweets doesn't deserve it. As they're drinking the wine, Johnny Pom Pom walks in and tells them that Mr. Torelli is furious with Pylon, for the vacuum he sold them has no motor in it. The last thing in this chapter is that Pylon and Danny shrug it off, saying that the Torellis get what they deserve, because the Torellis have been taking advantage of them for their trades for a while now, and cheapskating them a few gallons of wine, and that the Torellis' wine has been tasting worse every day. In this chapter, Pylon reminds me a lot of an antinomian because he rejects the law. We see this rejection of the law when he steals the vacuum, as he's looking at the bigger picture. Obviously, it is illegal to steal, but the bigger picture is that it'll help out his friend Danny, and that he is telling himself also that it's not rightfully Sweets. The vacuum is not rightfully Sweets. It's Danny, since Danny bought it. We also see that he sells the motorless vacuum, and he doesn't really care about the consequences. He just doesn't think that it applies to him, even though Mr. Torelli was really frustrated and claimed that he would kill Pylon. A few of the passions presented in this chapter are greed, lust, and selfishness. And we see greed presented through Sweets. When Sweets got the vacuum, she wanted electricity too. And it's interesting that Pylon is the one that recognized this greed in Sweets, as Pylon was once the greedy person, stealing money and not paying rent and drinking that wine for himself. So we could see this growth in Pylon, which is cool. And we see lust with Danny towards Sweets, and not obviously not the Sweets like on the screen, but Sweets, the new character. And his desires drive him in this chapter to buy the vacuum for her. But he does kind of overcome this passion by the end because his friends keep him in check. And then we do see selfishness presented in this chapter, but in a way that is being overcome. Pylon is overcoming selfishness by putting himself out there and risking his well-being for his friend Danny by stealing. A few solutions slash ways to live a better life for these characters would be hedonism for Danny. And I say that it might work because he already has a lifestyle similar to hedonism. He focuses on pleasure, and we see this with his obsession with wine. And hedonism is more about avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. And Danny could learn about the avoiding pain part, because if he knows which pleasures to actually chase after, he could have the wisdom to understand that lust is not a pleasure that is good, because it'll cause him pain later. And then for sweets, she could maybe focus a little bit on Catholic mysticism, as she could benefit from overcoming the passion of greed. And Catholic mysticism is all about God and overcoming greed by desiring to be poor, as in not needing to rely on materialistic things. And some follow-up questions. As mentioned previously, Sweets rises to the top of the social hierarchy when she receives her vacuum. What does this show about the town of Tortilla Flat? Do you think Sweets will lose her status in Tortilla Flat since she is no longer in possession of her vacuum? Why or why not? And why does Danny proclaim that the Torelli's wine tastes bad after the fact that Mr. Torelli said he was going to kill Pylon? Thanks.